Welcome to Education Today. I'm your host, Kitty Kelly Epstein. Thank you for being with us to discuss education issues and many other topics that affect our kids and our families. Today, we are discussing the situation of the protests that have been taking place in India, which people may have been reading a bit about. But it seems to me that the coverage is not thorough enough for us to really understand everything about what's happening. So we've invited a special person with us today to tell us more about what's happening there, and it's a person who may be familiar with some of you. Preeti Mangala Shekhar is a journalist, a radio producer, and a writer. She's currently based in her hometown of Chennai, South India. She's no stranger to KPFA's airwaves. Until 2024, she was based here in the East Bay, where she co-produced Apex Express and occasionally produced for Women's Magazine. Preeti joins us today because she's been closely following the Gen Z-led Cockroach Janata Party's nationwide protests in India, which are demanding a radical transformation of the country's broken and dysfunctional education. Welcome to Education Today.
Thank you. Thanks, Kitty. Great to be here on the other side of the microphone.
Right, on the other side of the microphone and the other side of the world. And
Yes.
and our wonderful engineer told me that it would work this way, and she's absolutely right. I can hear you clearly, and this is going to be terrific. So I wanted to start out by asking you about the protests. So young people in India have been protesting the educational system with great vigor, and I wonder if you could tell us about what the main issues are and how far does this extend across the country? Is it just in one place or is it in many places?
Yeah. So the protest started in Delhi, the capital city, New Delhi, and it was centered around particularly education. The education system in our country is terribly dysfunctional and broken. And in May, there's a national entrance examination for students who want to study engineering. It's called NEET. It's an acronym for a nationwide exam, and the paper leaked. And so this has been going on for many years, but this particular year, the paper leak became a huge issue, caused a lot of disruption, especially for students who want to get into medical school or engineering or even government jobs. And for working class families, this is not just like a regular test. It's something that they work years towards, sacrificing a lot. And so cancellation or rigging of this exam causes a lot of disruption and causes a lot of families to give up their dreams. About 12 students died by suicide when the paper leak issue happened.
So
So
let me
this,
make
this,
sure
yeah,
for
yeah.
myself and for our listeners that so you're saying that the content of the test was leaked beforehand and
The
therefore
questions, yeah.
the questions that
The
were going to be on the test were leaked and so that caused them to cancel the test? Is that
Yeah, because they have to do a re-exam, and the this is not a one-off issue. This has been going on for many years, but this particular year it kind of uh, was a culmination of globally the economy is not being great. There's a lot of unemployment, and this exam is the only way of social mobility for a lot of working class poor families. So this exam this year, particularly, the way the leak happened and it was traced and it became a huge investigative, story. So that kind of triggered this wave of protests by these students, which started in Delhi and then spiraled out and quickly caught on to other towns and cities in India, including my city where I am in Chennai.
so 12 young people committed suicide because they had worked so hard to be able to take this test and perhaps to increase the likelihood of better conditions for their families. And when the test wasn't given, that opportunity was wrecked, and so they committed suicide. That's what happened?
Right, right. But the exam was just a trigger because the conditions underlying were also already getting worse, right? There's been year after year, there's been massive unemployment and underemployment. The current political regime has been, spawning this story of growth, which is really false growth. It's been a growth without jobs where the rich have become richer, the poor have become poorer, something which is very familiar even in the United States, right?
Yes.
So, so that has also been a trigger, and I think the Gen Z, as who we call the students who went online and created a lot of social media campaigns to really. So the other thing is we have to talk about is the why it came to be called the cockroach protests. A minister called a minister in a speech, he referred to the young youth of India as cockroaches. And so this young student who actually was in Boston at the time, this young Indian student who was studying in Boston University, Abhijit Dipke, he said, he kind of made a satire about it and created a Instagram account. All this happened in a span of less than 2 months, Kitty. You have to
Wow.
like keep it in mind. It started
Wow.
in May, and he came back to India in June, and this Instagram account called the Cockroach Janata Party, Janata basically means people in Hindi. And so the account that he set up quickly had a few million followers within a few weeks. And
And everybody
and
said, if you want to call us cockroaches, then we'll be cockroaches and be proud of it, right? That
right,
that's
right.
a beautiful kind of thing young people will do so effectively, and it will catch on. That's beautiful. So it's the Cockroach People's Party, huh? Okay, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's not a political party per se, more like a movement.
Uh huh.
And when he returned to India in early June, and the protest kind of took off in Delhi, in a place called Jantar Mantar. And then another leading educator in the north, his name is Sonam Wangchuk. He announced a hunger strike, an indefinite hunger strike that went on for 26 days in
Wow.
solidarity with this movement. And their initial demands were the resignation of the education minister, and that is only the, the surface of the demand. And but the demand was met finally. So end of July, weeks of protests, and after a 26-day hunger strike by Sonam Wangchuk, and also about a handful of students who were leading this protest. It led to his resignation, which is remarkable. This the BJP government in its third term, has never had a minister resign on demand by the people. So the fact that he resigned, people are like, oh, well, he was replaced by another terrible minister. But that's not the point. The point is the demands were made, people protested, and the government had to listen.
And
So
that's
that was the
unusual.
remarkable
If
part.
I understand correctly, the situation in India right now, the government doesn't back down very much on very much of anything,
No,
right? It seems
no.
pretty ferocious. So
Yes, the freedom of
that's
speech greatly under attack. Media freedom is great under, very, very much under attack. So it really took social media and independent media to speak up and give voice to these protests. And in my city, there were protests 24/7, like 24/7, like for at least 6 days straight. Students were protesting in front of the Communist Party headquarters, which had given them the space, to protest. And it was remarkable. I would go at 11 o'clock at night, and students would be like there, doing spoken word, music, hip hop, distributing food, and, just really making a statement. It was remarkable to see that.
wow, 24 hours a day of protest. That's pretty intense. And your city is quite distant from New Delhi, right? So it
Yeah.
was a large portion of the country had some of these protests. Is that correct?
Yes, Mumbai, which is the commercial capital of India, there were huge protests there. Bangalore, which is a tech hub, as a lot of people know, it's India's Silicon Valley. They had some protests. My city, Chennai, which is, it's a big holdout against the current political regime in the north. there were huge protests, and across in the eastern part of this country also. So there were protests across the country, and then after the protests, after the resignation, the government did go after them and did a huge crackdown, and the protests were also not peaceful from the students' end, but there was a lot of instigation of violence by the police and attacks on the students. So a lot of students were also harmed.
And many students were arrested?
Yes, and but a lot of them were released eventually, but there were a lot of going after the students, and some of them continued to be trolled and attacked. And interestingly, or disturbingly rather, a lot of the women students who were visible. And you have to keep in mind, social media gives you a hyper visibility right away. So a lot of the young women who were leading the protest were attacked and trolled offline, and they've been speaking out in the last few weeks, in the last like this last week. All this is still unfolding, as you can tell.
So
um,
the movement has continued in spite of these attacks. And are there specific things? I know the victory was the resignation of this minister, which does seem like a huge victory in a country that's been so repressive recently. But
yes.
are there other specific demands that of the new person, or are people just trying to protect or get free the people who have been arrested and so on?
Yeah, I think the demand for his protest and the resignation itself, they were all symbolic, demands and wins. But eventually, we need a massive overhaul of the education system. Like I said, the way these central examinations are conducted, and it's also not an easy problem to solve. You're talking about a huge country with millions of students. So the larger problem will have to be addressed in a more systematic way. But the fact that a whole generation of students who were labeled as, just lazy or social media, not interested in social justice, they really turned around and showed that change is possible, and they persisted. And it was also remarkably funny to see all these memes that they would post. Eventually, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi had to also go on Instagram, and he, spoke to address the students on his Instagram, and they mocked him, right? They mocked him for how it was so funny the way. I mean, a lot of, it was in Hindi and other languages, and really mocked what he the hypocrisy and the apathy of this current political regime. And and somebody like Arundhati Roy, who also pointed out, she's been speaking in different forums as well. So she made this comment, which is very true, that a lot of these kids, their parents and grandparents had voted for Modi, right, term after
Uh-huh.
term.
I
And
see.
so now this generation has realized how hollow and hypocritical um, the promises of this government has been, which is very evident in the way the economy and the way the system has continued to favor the rich and the elite. And the other big, huge issue in India is the issue of caste. You know, the Dalits and historically oppressed castes continue to not have benefited from, either reservation, which is in the Indian version of affirmative action, and as well as um, just, the status, things have gotten worse in the name of uh, getting better. So calling out that hypocrisy and calling out and demanding that we see real change. I think this is the beginning of the end of the current political regime, is what the Neha, uh, I don't forget her last name, but she's the one of the students who also went on this 26-day hunger strike, and who said that, this is the beginning of the end. And right now, I think where we are at is the cockroach Janata Party. It's not a full-fledged political party, but more it's more a movement. I think they are very self-aware that this needs to be, uh, they have this momentum, and they shouldn't lose it. One of the fears is that this will all just die down and it'll be about this one minister resigning, which made no difference. So right now, so there's a lot of conversations going on, and people can go online easily, Google, and learn more about this movement and join conversations. There were also protests in the Bay Area. I want to mention that there is the one of the South Asian activist collectives that I've been a part of, the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action, as well as a couple of other activist groups put together a solidarity protest in front of the Indian consulate in late July. So, and there was another one in Fremont. So the fact that it took a life of its own, and thanks to social media and independent media amplifying it, it went viral. And right now, where things are at, it's you know protests are continuing. There are other protests happening across India, environmental, economic, issues being the main underlying crises. So, but the fact that it happened so quickly, and the scale at which it happened, right? Like, you're talking about 50,000 students marched um, in the capital of New Delhi.
Wow, that's spectacular. It's really, really, really impressive. Could you say again? You said the name of the organization that people can look at here, and there are other sources of more accurate or grassroots information coming from India. Is there any more that you could recommend that where people could read, where they'd get a better picture?
I think a starting place would be either on YouTube or Instagram, because TikTok is banned in India and is not a big medium.
I see.
But Instagram and YouTube are the two main spaces where the videos really took off, the memes and everything. So Cockroach Janta Party is the name of the movement, and there are a lot of in terms of other resources to offer. I think this is plenty, because if you go online, there's just so much to learn
Yes.
and follow. And Democracy Now! Did a special where they had Arundhati Roy on to talk about this at length, and she's been a big champion of these protests. And the other thing to make note of is a lot of public figures in India, including the popular cinema figures. Many of them were initially, did not give this voice, but eventually they did. And this speaks to the level of silencing of free speech in the country. And the fact that, the few public figures and intellectuals who speak out time and again, it's the same people. Uh, but, I think this time something felt different. And the fact that a lot more people have spoken up, both public figures as well as celebrities eventually did speak up. Uh, but it was a little late, but, better late than never,
Yes,
I
better late
suppose.
than never. Yes.
Yeah.
Can you say some more in specifics about? I know you're not determining what the demands are, or what people want changed in the educational system, but you said in general it's terrible. So can you mention a few of the things that seem terrible and that you would think would need to change?
I think the central examination itself that the students take to get entrance, it's a very flawed exam model that is extremely stressful, and it's a disproportionate number of students who compete basically to get into these few elite colleges, there's a huge there's also a lack of good we have India has not, post independence, I think, has not invested in good public universities. I mean, the few that were post independence, and after that, there's been a big gap. And this is what happened in the 70s and 80s when a US immigration to US opened up. A lot of people migrated and came there, right? Like, came to the US
Yes.
because of opportunities and for research and for higher education. But now, not that, immigration to the US has also become a very harrowing issue, and as well as to other European countries, which, a lot of young students migrated to, and Canada. All these places have also become not appealing anymore,
Yes.
the phobia. So then you're left looking at what opportunities you have in your own country, which is dismal. And it's hyper competitive. So the model has to change. And the exam issue is, it's also the college to jobs pipeline is also a very broken one. And now on top of that, we have AI. So you're really looking at, multiple, it's a polycrisis, right, coming together. So it's not going to be an easy thing to resolve. But I think the larger issue at stake is democratic institutions have been really, you know, emptied of their meaning and their functions. So I think restoring democratic processes and institutions and giving them the, like uh, giving them the due dignity of have, uh, that they exist in a democratic fashion. I think that has been made, it's very clear that we need uh, a system that is not rigged to always favor the rich. And
Yes.
right now, that's what it is. India has a large number of billionaires, and a handful of people own more than 60% of the people. So the numbers, when you look it up, makes no sense, and it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. So what gives, right? So I think that's where the Gen Z are extremely smart. They know that they have no other way but to fight to change the system,
Yeah.
because the system is just completely broken.
Yeah. Yeah. And beautiful that young people are recognizing that. Is there an impact of how does the caste system impact the educational system?
Well, historically, the privileged caste people, communities, who are smaller in number, have, uh, been historically had access to education and jobs, and it's also it's like an old boys club, like, like how it works is, the so reservation was introduced in the 1990s, and it was met with a lot of protests by the upper castes, who, continued to dominate the media, and so it was made out to be like a huge victimization, right? So and it was seen as taking away merit as a way to as a criteria. So the way these conversations
Can
were
you
played out.
name it again and say what it was supposed to do that was opposed by the rich?
Right. So reservation basically said the cutoff marks for uh, historically oppressed caste would be lower than um, the dominant castes for getting access, getting entrance, for getting
I
admission
see.
to a particular
So
course
people
or
from
college.
the
Like,
lower castes might be able to have a somewhat lower score and still be able to get into an institution. And it's called the
right, right.
reservation system. Okay.
It's called reservation. It's like affirmative action in the US,
Yes.
and it's also to correct a historic wrong, right? And also to acknowledge that being deprived of generational access to education also makes a difference. So, for example, I come from a dominant caste, and the fact that I have parents who also have college degrees makes a huge difference to also how I am able to access my education
Yes.
and the resources and the opportunities I have. So that's something that, we don't talk about, right? And the same, so the fact that even I was able to come to the US to study for grad school, that's something that typically the more privileged and elite have,
Yes.
right? Access to.
Yes.
So that's how these networks function. It's like it's a way of gatekeeping.
Yes.
So, and reservation hasn't been effectively implemented, and that's another huge issue you can talk hours about.
Yes.
So, and as every system is, there's corruption, there's misuse, there is also inadequate use. So, the fact that millions of Dalits are still struggling and are still at, you know, what you call like you've not broken the cycle of poverty,
Yes.
generational poverty. So it's telling that there's a lot more needs to be done. So
And
yeah.
in the protests, are there people from? Well, I have two more quick questions in the last 2 minutes that we have. Were there people from all castes involved in the protests?
The protests were, what when I was reading about up for this discussion, were completely, people from across communities, across class, and Abhijit Dipke, who spearheaded this movement, sitting in Boston, and then he came back to India. He's a Dalit,
Uh-huh.
and and it has students from across communities. And you're also talking about a time where the Muslim communities, which is huge in India, the second to only the Hindus, are under attack. So there's a lot of Islamophobia. That's something in common globally right now in this current
Yes.
political movement.
Yes.
So Abhijit himself said that if he were a Muslim, he would not have been so successful with this movement, which is very telling of who has privilege and who doesn't,
I
right? And as
see.
a Hindu Dalit, he was able to pull this off. And it's really hats off to him and all the other youth who really pushed forward and made their case so remarkably.
It is remarkable and very exciting, and I hope our listeners. You've given us a couple places that people can read up some more, and I guess in those places they might find something useful to do. Perhaps is there something people in the U.S. can do that would be helpful?
I would just say go online and read up the Wire, Scroll, News Minute. There's a lot of independent media out of India, News Laundry. These are all excellent sites that have been really watching these protests, and YouTube again has once you start looking up these resources, your algorithm will also send you more.
Right.
That's all I'll say. So yeah, there's a lot out there. And once you follow them on socials, there's like a lot of them. Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking with us. We've been talking with Preeti Mangala Shekar from India, who has been telling us about the magnificent and at least initially victorious movement that's been happening there among young people trying to get an educational system that works better for them. We appreciate you being with us so much. And I hope that perhaps you'll come back again as the movement continues, because there's a lot of education about India that I think Americans need that we get very little of. So thank you so much for sharing with us. And
Thank you. My
yes,
pleasure.
and you've been listening to Education Today on KPFA 94.1. I'm your host, Kitty Kelly Epstein, and we will be back with you again next week at 2:30 in the afternoon. Thank you and have a good week. Bye-bye.
Algorithms promote whatever keeps you scrolling. Corporations fund whatever protects the bottom line. KPFA answers to something different. The people listening. When you become a monthly guardian, you help build a dependable foundation for independent news, cultural programming, radical conversations, and music selected by people who actually care about what you hear. Make a difference today. Champion independent radio right now. Stand with KPFA at this very moment by becoming a monthly guardian at kpfa.org.
This is 94.1 KPFA and 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, and online everywhere at kpfa.org.
KPFA.